Today, we're going to do something a little different, a kind of psychological autopsy. We're going to use the tools of psychoanalysis to really understand the tragic downfall of one of literature's most legendary characters, Okonkwo, from Chinua Achebe's masterpiece, Things Fall Apart.
I mean, by all accounts, Okonkwo was a great man, a powerful warrior, a respected leader, pretty much the symbol of Igbo masculinity. And yet, by the end of the book, he has completely unraveled. So what happened? Well, to figure that out, we have to look inside his mind.
This is the real mystery of his character, isn't it? It's the question that's kept readers fascinated for decades. How could a man who achieved literally everything he ever wanted be driven to complete and utter self-destruction?
You know, it's so easy to focus on Okonkwo's strength, but if we do that, we're looking in completely the wrong place. The key to understanding his downfall isn't his power at all, but the profound, unconscious fear that was secretly fueling his every single action. And that fear? Well, it has a source, a name and a face. It's the man who haunted him his entire life, his father, Okonkwo. This is where Okonkwo's psychological story really begins.
Just look at this contrast. It is absolutely night and day. On one side, you have Okonkwo, gentle, artistic, but ultimately seen by his community as a failure, poor, in debt, and ridiculed. And then you have Okonkwo, who built his entire life to be the exact opposite, aggressive, respected, and powerful. You see, he wasn't just building a life, he was running from a legacy.
In Freudian psychology, there's actually a specific term for this. It's called reaction formation. It's a really powerful defense mechanism where if you're terrified of being something, you overcompensate by becoming its polar opposite. But here's the crucial thing about this kind of defense. It's incredibly brittle. It takes a constant, massive amount of mental energy to keep up, and under enough pressure, it's pretty much designed to shatter.
And this right here, this explains Okonkwo's entire personality. His famous aggression, his warlike nature, that obsession with status, it was all a desperate, lifelong performance. And it was all designed to suppress one single fear. Buried so deep in his unconscious, he probably didn't even know it was there. The fear of being seen as weak and effeminate, just like his father.
Okay, so if his father is the why, we now need to look at the how. How did he build this defense? Well, he constructed a kind of psychological armor to protect himself, an armor made almost entirely of anger.
To maintain this armor, Okonkwo basically had to wage war on his own emotions. He actively suppressed any affection, especially for his family. He rejected compassion. He refused to show grief. Any feeling at all that he associated with softness, which in his mind meant feminine and weak, had to be completely crushed.
And this creates a really dangerous psychological loop. It starts with that fear of weakness, which leads him to suppress all those so-called feminine emotions. But here's the thing, emotions don't just disappear. They build, and they build, creating this immense internal tension. And with no healthy outlet, that pressure had to go somewhere. For Okonkwo, it erupted as violent rage.
This means his famous temper wasn't a sign of strength at all. It was the opposite. His violence was a defense mechanism, a substitute for the emotional expression he was way too afraid to allow himself. It was all just protecting a deeply fragile ego.
But, you know, no armor is perfect, and a single act of violence would start to create the first real cracks in Okonkwo's rigid defenses. And this moment centers on his adopted son, Ikamefuna.
So, when the oracle demanded Ikemefuna's death, Okonkwo was warned not to participate. But to prove he wasn't weak, what does he do? He delivers the killing blow himself. Now, publicly, this just cemented his reputation for strength. But privately, unconsciously, the act of killing a boy who called him father inflicted a profound trauma.
And you can see the symptoms of this trauma starting to leak out. He couldn't sleep, he was emotionally disturbed, refusing to eat. His repressed guilt was bubbling to the surface, showing that the emotional part of him he tried so hard to kill was still very much alive. The cracks were showing. So, just as Okonkwo's internal world was beginning to fracture, an external force arrived that would shatter it completely, the arrival of the European colonialists and missionaries. Remember, Okonkwo's entire psychological stability, his very identity, was built on the rigid structure of his culture. His status, his titles, his reputation, these were the pillars holding up his fragile ego. And that foundation, which he thought was unshakable, was about to be systematically dismantled by a force he couldn't fight with his fists.
The arrival of the missionaries and colonial government inflicted the ultimate psychological wounds. For a man obsessed with control, they rendered him powerless. For a man terrified of ridicule, they brought humiliation. His status was erased, and with it, his entire reason for being. This wasn't just a cultural change. For Okonkwo, it was a complete identity collapse.
So, with both his internal armor and his external world shattered, Okonkwo was cornered. His psychological defenses had failed, leaving him with absolutely no way to cope.
His rigid personality made it impossible for him to adapt to this new world. After his final act of defiance, killing a court messenger, he realizes his clan will not go to war. His world is gone. And from a Freudian perspective, with no external enemy left to fight, his lifelong aggression finally turns inward.
So in the end, it all comes together. The tragedy isn't just one thing. It's the repressed fear, the unresolved conflict with his father's memory, and the extreme emotional rigidity that left him unable to bend when the world broke. It was a perfect storm of internal flaws meeting an overwhelming external force.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering question. Was Okonkwo a victim of his own psychological demons? Or was he the victim of a brutal historical change that destroyed his entire world? Perhaps, in the end, the tragedy is that you simply can't separate the two.